circadian rhythms. So our circadian rhythm is a 24-hour cycle. So circadian rhythm isn't just sleep, like you have other circadian rhythms, but by definition, it is sort of a 24-hour cycle. So sleep fits into that category quite nicely because, again, in 24 hours, we sleep at night and we wake up during the day, and then that cycle repeats every 24 hours. So we have these sort of cues, so our Zeitgebers, I hope I'm saying that right, but these are our sort of sleep cues that occur within the environment that help tell our body when it's time to be awake and when it's time to sleep. So we'll talk about these towards the end of this section. But for example, light, clocks, meal times, noise, they all work to tell our body, what time of the day is it? And, is it time for bed? Is it time to be awake or is it time to be asleep? And sort of sticking to this circadian rhythm. So when those cues are a little bit out, for example, like if you're coming back from a flight, if you're jet lagged, that sort of thing, if those cues are a little bit out, that can throw off your circadian rhythm and throw off your sleep cycle ultimately. This is more like a bit of a fun fact. If you keep people, so basically I think they kept people in a room and they took away all these cues, so took away lights, clocks, meal times, whatever. They found that, once these people got into a rhythm of sleeping regularly, it fits more towards a 25-hour cycle than 24. But yeah, that's more just something to be aware of. That I remember this point because when you think about jet lag, and we can kind of discuss this when we get into circadian rhythm phase disorders, but with jet lag, often you'll find that they always use the term west is best, because if you travel west, so for example, if you travel from Australia, okay, I'm trying to think. So for example, I came back from a trip a couple days ago. So I went to Europe. So when I went to Europe, I was traveling west, right? So I was traveling west, and it's to do with the sun and whatever. But this idea is that the day gets longer because you travel back in time. So obviously Europe is behind Australia. So when I traveled there, the day got longer. I went back in time, I guess. And because the day is longer, we're able to adjust a little bit easier because it extends the day. So it goes towards that, 25-hour cycle. And we prefer our bodies prefer if the day is extended, and sometimes we can get used to that a bit more quickly compared to if we're coming east and the day shortens. So obviously you're coming east, you're kind of losing time. And the idea is that the day gets shorter. So rather than having to stay awake a little bit longer, you're probably going to have to go to sleep a little bit earlier, if that makes sense. And so that's why traveling east, sometimes people find that they adjust a little bit worse. Yeah, obviously different people experience different things, but I think that's always something that stuck in my head and always made me remember that stuff about jet lag and 25-hour cycles and all that sort of thing. Okay, so this idea of light, so light is kind of our strongest cue for sleep. And it works by influencing the release of melatonin. So melatonin is the sleep hormone. So light basically tells the body when to release melatonin. So melatonin will make us feel sleepy, and when to sort of inhibit that. So you need to know these areas of the brain. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN, is part of your hypothalamus. So if you're familiar with the hypothalamus, very important in maintaining homeostasis and coordinating release of hormones and just making sure that the body is regulated and working nicely. So a portion of that is obviously to do with sleep, and this is the idea of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So the SCN basically will get this input, depending on how much light we're seeing, and it will send messages to the pineal gland. So the pineal gland, a gland is anything that can release hormones. So the pineal gland does that. It releases melatonin. So the SCN, and this is, again, if you've looked at stuff with hypothalamus maybe in previous years in science, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is part of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus kind of sits up here, just tells people what to do, gets information, tells people what to do. So that's the role of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And then it gets the, orders, or, it says okay, there's a lot of light coming in. I have to go and do something. Let me, tell like the little people. I kind of think about it like the suprachiasmatic nucleus is a bit higher in the brain, like it sort of sits on the throne or whatever. And then it tells its, little pineal gland, like, hey, there's a lot of light. I'm, seeing a lot of light. Do not release that melatonin. Don't make me sleepy. The light is on, which means that I'm obviously, it's daytime. I'm meant to be awake. That's what it's saying. Then the pineal gland goes, okay, cool. I'm not going to release any melatonin. The SCN told me not to because it's light out. Obviously, I don't want to be tired if it's daylight. And that's the idea. And then you don't get drowsy. Whereas the other flip side would be the SCN realizes it's very dark. It's not getting a lot of light input. It tells the pineal gland, okay, it's dark. Release the melatonin. Make me drowsy. It's time for bed. So that is the idea there. So obviously more melatonin means more sleepy. Less melatonin means less sleepy. So that's the idea there. So obviously you'd have a lot of higher melatonin around bedtime. Okay, so that's your circadian rhythm. Your ultradian rhythm, if we compare the definitions, is less than 24 hours. So your circadian rhythm is over a 24-hour period. Ultradian rhythm, by definition, again, you can imagine there's a lot of bodily functions that would fit into an ultradian rhythm, is any sort of cycle that lasts less than 24 hours. So when we're thinking about ultradian rhythms, we're thinking about those individual sleep cycles. So these go for about 90 minutes, hence less than 24 hours. I'll flip back to the little graph here. So you can see cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3. So each of these is an ultradian rhythm. So 5 cycles here, each are an ultradian rhythm. You can see that they're about 90 minutes-ish. Okay, yeah, so that's what we're talking about there. So a good thing to remember, I feel like sometimes it can be confusing to think about, but an ultradian rhythm, it's your NREM and your REM. So just like we saw in that little graph there, REM, NREM, 1, 2, 3, 4. REM, 1, 2, 3, 4, REM, 1, 2, 3, 4, REM, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the REM and the NREM together, that is one sleep cycle, that is one ultradian rhythm. It's not, NREM stage 1 and then stage 2, or it's not NREM 1 to 4 and then REM is different and then NREM is different. One block of REM and NREM, one cycle. The next block of REM and NREM, the next cycle, so on.